For this episode of the Horn Notes video podcast, we welcome back Derek Wright of Houghton Horns, and the topic today is trying horns and trying mouthpieces. One thing I've noticed over the years is it's really important to work with students on mouthpieces, as the wrong one can really hold people back, and they can end up using it like for years and years, kind of unbeknownst to you as a teacher. You know, you really do need to think about this. Now, Derek, you've seen a lot of people try mouthpieces and horns, so I want to start with mouthpieces. I mean, what are some of the common mistakes you see?
I'd say as far as mouthpieces are concerned, I think people try to, number one, just get the mouthpiece that their teacher uses or the mouthpiece that X famous player uses, when they really should be finding something that will help them to, number one, be comfortable and to truly move around the instrument. Mouthpiece, in a lot of ways, is far more important than the horn. It's the first point of contact. And a bad mouthpiece can hold you back much more than a bad horn can.
Yeah, that's true. And just backing up to, you mentioned the famous person's mouthpiece sort of trap, you know. Sometimes I'll try like rims and things that are from famous players, and I'll play it. I'm like, how in the world could they play this mouthpiece? This is like, they must just be incredibly strong. You know, that somebody's like a really good player and plays a certain mouthpiece doesn't mean it's going to work for you at all, because they just may be so muscled up and they're so the way they are, they can do it. But a normal person, it's just not going to work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, as far as mouthpiece is concerned, like, you definitely listen to articulation. So you have to be very, very careful about that. And you definitely have to listen to flexibility. One of my favorite excerpts to play when trying a mouthpiece is Stravinsky's Fairy Kiss, you know, the Fairy's Kiss. That, it's a harder excerpt, but if you can play it, that will really tell you which mouthpieces are working, which mouthpieces aren't, as far as flexibility is concerned. That's
a good tip right there. In the previous episode, we talked about standard versus Euroshanks, and I don't want you to get, maybe too, inside baseball here, but I mean, there's certain popular brands of horns that people are using. I mean, in terms of what you see people do when they try them at the shop, for example, which horns do people gravitate towards Euroshanks on versus standard shanks?
Engelbert Schmidt horns use a mouthpiece tape. According to Engelbert, his horns are supposed to be able to accept either standard or European shanks, because he uses what's called a combo taper. However, most people find that a Euroshank will just work better in those horns. Definitely Alexander. Alexander horns you'll want a European, taper mouthpiece for, and those are the two most common models where you need a European taper mouthpiece. Also, all the Alexander 103 copies.
Mm-hmm.
So, those horns tend to take European shank mouthpieces as well. For the vast majority of horns, a Morse taper mouthpiece will work better, unless it's an old horn in the lead pipe. The mouthpiece receiver is worn on the horn.
Right. So start with the regular one, but you can certainly get one way I've had people try to get an idea if your horn would play better with a European shank is to take your regular one and wrap paper around it just to back it out just a little bit, like one layer of paper, and just see if that does something good or does something bad. You can usually tell something pretty quickly with that. It won't tell you exactly, but it tells you something. Yeah, and then, we'll probably come back to mouthpieces here again, but horns is the other big topic. I mean, people try horns a lot, and I mean, everybody likes trying horns, right? Or they should. Some people actually really don't like change.
Some people really do not. They don't want to try anything new.
And it's sort of funny. I feel sort of sad for them in a way. They're just so locked into like what they're playing on, and they wouldn't even think about trying another mouthpiece unless they have a month off to not get screwed up or something. And it's worth trying. You can do it, folks. What are common mistakes do you see in terms of trying horns?
I'd say the number one mistake, and I'm not number one mistake I see is not having strong convictions about your sound. So what I mean by that is having a sound in your head that you want to sound like. So, having when people come into the shop, a lot of times they'll ask, who's your favorite player? Whose tone do you appreciate the most? Whose sound do you want to emulate and maybe even surpass? Now, you don't have to be there, sound-wise, but that will go a long ways to helping you choose the horn that you want, because you want the horn that makes it easier for you to sound how you want to sound. And I'm not throwing in, 6th, 7th, 8th graders into there,
Right.
they're just developing. But by the time if you're a good high school student, you're making it into region, all-state bands, or you're considering going into music school, and especially anyone who's in music school, you should know what you want to sound like, or else you'll never get there.
Yeah, and at the same time too, at that point you need a horn that's good enough that a professional would think about playing it. It's otherwise it's just holding you back on that side too.
And that will come down to sound. If you know what you want to sound like, you'll usually find that the horns that professionals don't use, they're not using for a reason.
No way, really. But it says on the website it's professional quality. Yeah, websites can say a lot of stuff.
Yeah, that's another thing I end up saying a lot. I recommend people because people want to be well researched before they come into the shop to try a horn, and they say, okay, I looked at this article, I read everything I could about each horn. I try to get them to forget all of that. You can't read about a horn, because every manufacturer will make their horn seem like it's really good. So you can't say, well, X manufacturer said this horn gets a dark sound, this horn gets a rich sound. Do I want like darker or richer? And it does,
Well, and nobody wants like small or whatever too,
right.
So it's kind of like, Now, one thing I've often think about too is your perception of how a horn feels. I mean, a lot of people, they just want a horn that plays better. They know they're not happy with what they're playing.
Right.
They think it's kind of the Fisher-Price horn, and they're just sort of stuck here, and I need something better. And they do need something better, but their perception will be impacted a lot by what they have been playing when they try horns. I mean, how do you kind of get past that as somebody trying horns?
Well, a lot of times people fall into the trap of picking a horn that they missed the fewest notes on. And
well, yeah, of course,
right.
That's like part of it. Well,
but
if the connections are good and stuff, you will miss less notes on it,
true.
Right?
But oftentimes, though, that leads you to pick a horn that's very much like the horn that you had, because the slots are in different places on each horn. So
right.
So if you play a horn, it's obviously getting a much better sound. It's doing much better in every aspect. But the slots are in a slightly different place, so you're missing a few more notes than you might normally. You don't want to dismiss that horn and say, oh, well, it misses notes for me.
Well, and the slots will be sort of a different shape, too, if that makes any sense. It can be slottier or looser, and it depends what you're used to, what you think about that.
Exactly.
I think I mentioned this in the mouthpiece episode. I mean, I think a lot about lately. I've been thinking a lot about connections between notes, and it's influenced by the mouthpiece and the horn, and a lot of things, design factors. You get talking to makers, it has to do with, this slide being butt jointed. It has to do with braces. It's X factor magic type stuff. I mean,
but I'll say,
how do you?
One thing to keep a watch out as far as connections. A lot of times, a horn that slurs very badly is due to poor construction quality on the horn. And that's not something, a horn's gotten old and it's worn. That's just how it came out of the factory. How well was the tubing put together? Are there any globs of solder inside the tubing? Are there any, two pieces of tubing that aren't exactly, basically anything that disturbs the air inside of the horn, that creates any sort of turbulence, is really going to negatively affect slurring and connections and things like that. So that's always one thing to keep, to be on watch for.
Yeah, no, definitely. Just randomly, I mean, people talk too about breaking a horn in. Like, somebody plays a brand new horn versus one that's broken in. I mean, is there really that much difference notable? Like, say, you buy a used horn versus a new one that's basically the same horn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if there's a used horn out there that meets your needs, I would almost always go used over new. And that's just because, there is very little difference between a horn that's broken in and not broken in. I know this can be a contentious subject, and people have
the reason I asked it was because if you turn to the Gunther Schuler book, it's on like the first page of the book. He has like a thing in there about pouring milk through your horn to break it in, and it's like, this is the most ridiculous thing. I mean, Gunther, rest his soul out there. He passed away pretty recently, but that's just like a strange. Don't pour milk through your horn, people out there.
No, please.
It's not a good idea. It's not going to break it in. It won't help anything.
Horns. Horns will break in over a period of years, but not over, in my opinion, not over a period of weeks or months. And that's just getting down to physics. You're blowing air into a metal tube put together with lead solder. It takes a long time to do anything to it.
Well, I think to a point. Now, I don't say this enough to students, but I mean, the horn breaks you in, really. I mean, sure. You become used to playing on it, and you get used to how to slot the notes so they're in tune, and the high range is in tune and stuff because you're using your oral cavity right and some other things. But it's kind of specific to the horn and how the maker made it. So I just have one final thing to ask you briefly. I mean, obviously you know where the market is, and without being brand specific particularly, unless you'd like to, I mean, what trends do you see and where's the market going?
I don't think it'll be a surprise to anyone to know that it's all about Geyer-style horns these days.
No way.
Yeah.
Really? I kind of guessed that.
Yeah, it's hard. It gets harder and harder every year to sell CRISPR-style horns, and there are many good playing horns out there. Especially the older, an older restored Elkhart is a very good horn, but it's not the sound people are looking for these days.
It's not what the cool kids are playing.
They want more focused and more colorful, and I haven't seen any backing off on that trend yet.
Yeah, well, that's anyway. Breaking news, though. It's been coming for a while. It's been coming for a while, and I came out of that 8D school, but I mean, I sold my 8D, and I'm selling my big horn and kind of moving on. It's a little bit of change for sound, but I'm liking it. It plays good. Well, I mean, any other final just little thoughts you have about trying horns, mouthpieces that comes to mind?
I would just always, and it's weird to say as a horn vendor, someone trying to sell horns, but always remember that the most important part of the equation is you and your practice and how you play. Like I said in the last episode, a bad mouthpiece can hold you back. A bad horn can hold you back, but the first place that you should take a look for problems is to you. And then, if you've done that, you can take a look at equipment. Yeah.
Well, good advice right there. So, again, thank you, Derek, for joining us. Again, the website for Houghton Horns, they have new and used horns. Just search for it. You'll find it very easily. So, again, thanks for joining us, and thank you out there for listening to the Horn Notes video podcast. Keep watching for more episodes on a variety of topics related to the French horn.
All right, thank you for having me.
Thank you.